Macy's has all of your Grill Master essentials for Father's Day. Stop by to get our hand-trimmed chicken breast and certified Angus beef patties that are ready to grill, so Dad can have his favorite dinner. Make sure to browse our bakery to find the perfect no-work Father's Day treat with our decadent peanut butter bars or famous donuts. Right now, you can get boneless beef ribeye steaks for $12.99 per pound at Macy's. Shop these Father's Day essentials in-store or online at Macys.com through June 18th. Macy's, happy shopping!
All right, welcome everyone to another episode of Behind the Human. I'm your host, Mark Champagne. It's my job to unpack the stories and mental fitness practices of people living at the top of their game, personally and professionally. Today we're jamming with Stephanie, who is an author and actress known for her roles in The Devil Wears Prada, Iron Man 3, and the ABC hit series A Million Little Things. Raised in Paris, in the suburbs of Paris, she moved to the US to study business at the College of William and Mary. After earning a marketing degree and working at Chanel in New York City, then she switched to acting, which I can't wait to get into the details of that because that seems like a really interesting departure. Steph is also the author of a book that I'm a huge fan of called Selfish, a book and practical guide for self-discovery and mental well-being. For those obviously who are a fan of this show, you know that I'm a pretty big fan of any kind of practical tools to help our minds work for us instead of against us. And this book is definitely that. So, Stephanie, welcome.
I'm so excited to be on your show. Thanks for having me, Mark.
Me too.
And by the way, I just have to say you have the best name.
I'll take it.
Having grown up in France, Marc, first of all, Marc was my brother's name, and who I lost and I adored, and it was spelled with a C like you, and then who doesn't like champagne? So
I'll take it. Thank you. I get it's interesting. So I completely understand French, and actually my wife is fluently bilingual and only speaks French to our boys in the house. So there's a lot of French over here. I've lost the confidence to speak back. But as you mentioned, like my name couldn't be more French. So it happens all the time. I get emails or conversations and people are kind of shocked when I reply back in English. But
yes, and writing is also hard because even I grew up in France, like you said, but I've been gone for so long, and writing in emails in French is daunting for me because I talk about things that I didn't talk about when I was 19 years old, and I don't really know how to express myself on those things in French. So I get it.
I appreciate that. Okay, before we jump into, I've got so many things I want to ask you about. But as you know, because as you mentioned earlier that you've been listening to the show, you know what question you're about to get, Steph, right? That's let's avoid all the titles and the work and all that kind of stuff and just strip it back to... I get caught off guard with this question too when I'm on podcasts, which I shouldn't at this point, but let's just roll with it. Who are you?
Who am I? I didn't want to prepare for this because I wanted to see what would come up. I would say I am a work in progress, of course, and that's a good thing. I am half French, half American, and I feel that's a lot of who I am. We have a saying in French that is "J'ai le cul entre deux chaises," which means my butt is in between two chairs, and I think that's how I feel a lot of times about life. I lean on one way, but then I go on the other, and a lot of being uncomfortable, and yet it's exciting to, find ways to be more comfortable and to discover along the way. My passion is to create. It's acting. It's human nature. And my number one priority in the world are my children, my husband of 28 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. That is something to say congratulations to, I believe too.
Yeah, I agree. I want to pull a little bit on the thread around kind of sitting in between the chair. Because that's interesting, and just knowing a little bit about your backstory, of course, preparing for this, and you talk a lot about impostor syndrome, especially when, in the acting world and so forth. But do you think, like, what's the link, I guess? Because that when I hear that, I see the benefits of, like you said, kind of being in two different realities or two different identities in a way, but also I feel maybe the pressure or stress of that and almost maybe feeling pulled, in a way. Am I just making stuff up, or do you resonate with any
No,
of
I
that?
think it's a theme. That's why I kind of mentioned it, because it's it's a theme that for me started really early in life. Even I remember silly, in elementary school when teachers would ask everyone, what's your favorite color? And it would send me in this, my favorite color. I have many favorite colors. What am I going to say?
Sure.
But and so I think ultimately it's about this feeling of being put in a box sometimes, and nobody's doing that. I probably that's just a personal fear, but I think it's led me to have a path that's not really conventional. Like you said, I started acting when I was 29 years old. I just wrote a book at 50 some years plus years old. Um, and now I think I've made peace with this feeling of sometimes I feel like I don't fit in, and that's okay.
Where did it all begin, Steph? Like, there was the move from Paris to the US and so forth, and from my understanding, starting to study business and so forth, and spending some time at Chanel, but there was something, and there's golf in there. There's so many beautiful facets to your story, and not just like golf as a hobby. I mean, were you on a scholarship? Like, I mean, you play at a quite high level, like you would say, right?
Yeah, but they didn't have scholarships for the golf team. But I
Okay.
was a 5 handicap, and it was Division 1 golf. So
Okay. Wow.
not great, but pretty good.
Pretty darn good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, why don't we
Mm-mm.
fill in some of the gaps
Yeah.
around, your world into acting, and like, did you always want to be an actress? Did you always want to get into that world? Because you mentioned this, and I kind of mentioned as well. Like, it's your path to that space seems very non-traditional, which doesn't. I don't think that's good or bad. It's just that's your path. But in your mind, like, kind of, what was lighting you up? Like, what did you want to do? How did you get clear on essentially where you're at right now?
I would say I didn't get clear what I never thought about acting, and never took an acting class growing up. Um, then I always did sort of the traditional thing, and was what was expected of me. I think I fell into that role growing up, because my brother had, my brother was a little bit of a troubled child and had drug addiction. And so I fell into the role of I'm going to be the good girl. And I worked at Chanel. And then by chance, somebody asked me there after 2.5 years, do you want to model for us on this in-house brochure thing, which I did. And the photographer there asked, which modeling agency are you with? And I was like, no, I'm not a model. I'm 26 years old and I work at Chanel. But then that sort of planted a seed of, oh, maybe I could do something different, because I was in an office. I liked my job. I liked my boss, but it wasn't, like you said, lighting me up. And I
Sure.
knew that. And so I took a chance and left acting and went to modeling. Left Chanel and went into modeling. And that's when I had the idea, what if I took an acting class? And it took me 3 years to actually follow through on that. Because
Okay.
again, people were like, you're too old, you have an accent. But then I got myself into a theater class in New York City and did my first monologue and realized, oh my gosh, I love this. And I don't know at what level I will do it, but I need to pursue this.
What did you feel in that moment? I'm curious, like, when it really hit you around, like, just around the fact that you love it, like, how did you feel in your body? Was there something that was just
Yes.
different?
Yes. Complete freedom and surrendering and connection uh, to really like who I was, and freedom to be. Really, that's what it was. As I was hiding behind another character, I somehow discovered pieces of myself that I hadn't really, or I had buried, I guess, through the years.
What happened next? How did it all go? Where did it go from acting classes, I guess, to, landing, titles that we're familiar with, but also the ones that, that we aren't, because that's part of the whole journey, right? Like, we always like to celebrate the highlight reels, but I mean, it's, there's a lot of work that takes place in really any profession that is, I would say, unseen.
Yes, the behind the scenes. I was lucky because I booked, big roles in small movies early on, did a lot of commercials. And so that was kind of my bread and butter. But I got a lead role in a small movie that shot in New York City. It was called Satellite. And it was a beautiful little movie that I think we shot for $100,000 or something.
Wow.
And this movie got into Tribeca. It got into other festivals. It got an amazing review in the New York Times. And then the producers didn't negotiate the music rights well. And so it never got released.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was kind of, I mean, it just shows you, and I remember just feeling this high going to the Tribeca Film Festival and thinking, oh my gosh, there it is. I'm going to get an agent now, because I actually didn't even have an agent. But then it was back to square one. And for 10 years, it was a lot of that. Something would happen, but then, I got a part in a movie with Michael Douglas's wife, Catherine Zeta-Jones.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I worked with an actor called Justin Bartha, and we did a really fun scene. It was a comedy. The crew was laughing. I was like, oh, this is great. And he looked at me at the end and said, good job. I hope it doesn't get cut out of the movie. And at the time, I thought, well, that's so rude for him to say.
Yeah, no kidding.
But, I was kind of like, you dick. Mm-hmm. But he was not at all. He just was he had been in the business for many years. And actually that scene ended up being cut out of movies. It's out of the movie. It's a brutal profession. And fast forward 10 years, later, so not much, I got a tidbit role in Devil Wears Prada in the middle, which was amazing. A small role. Then I got pregnant with my first child, and my agent at the time said, what are you doing getting pregnant now? You're an idiot.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. But then after 10 years, my husband and I have 2 kids, and we were supposed to go to Buffalo to visit some friends over the weekend. And I booked a short movie. So, short movie is a 12-minute movie that nobody will really ever see. It's a vehicle for new directors to showcase what they can do. But so I got a short movie that filmed on the weekend and was unpaid. And I said to my husband, shoot, what do I do? And he's amazing. And he said, do you like the role? I said, yes. It's, she works in a sex shop. She's fun. And he said, all right, an actor works. That's what your acting teacher always said to you. You do the short movie. I go to Buffalo and visit our friends with the kids. And I worked with an actor, Ryan Onan, on this short movie, who was incredible. And he said to me, I want to introduce you to my manager. And he had a big time manager. And he was so generous. He sent her all my stuff, and this manager became my manager and really changed how my career went, because she had such a reputation in the business. And so she sent me to Los Angeles, and 3 weeks later, I booked my first lead role in a big studio film called Dinner for Schmucks.
Oh, yes. Wow. So what do you make of, I have a lot of questions. Maybe the first question is just, knowing the work that you're really passionate about when it comes to the mind and with your book, Selfish and so forth, like, how did you survive those 10 years? Like, what was the narrative in your mind? Or did you have any tools at that time. Maybe you didn't have the same labels that you do today, but that were just instrumental in being able to just keep going, right? And handle what, you provided some examples of like basically rejection and everything you have to go through as someone trying to further their career.
It's interesting because of golf and competition, I think I used a lot of the tools that I used on the golf course, which, I prepare very hard. I knew the concept of being in the present and just I am very persistent and I don't give up. But at the same time, because I was was much older. People didn't believe that I could do this, and so I didn't have any negative inner dialogue. I had normal negative inner dialogue, but it wasn't paralyzing.
Okay.
I think because I was, does it make sense? Like you said, I was kind of the underdog. Nobody believed I could do this, and so in a way, I respond really well to negative reinforcement. I always have. So if people don't believe in me, I'm like, hey, I'm going to show you.
Yeah, yeah.
But strangely enough, when I got the lead role in Dinner for Schmucks, all of a sudden it was a big director, big casting director, producers who are like, we love you. Come on our movie. We believe in you. And that's when my confidence completely collapsed. So in a way, like when people believed in me, I stopped believing in myself, and I did not have the tools to know how to navigate that. The tools I had was negative self-talk, which only goes, like, come on, get it together kind of thing. And that wasn't helpful.
It is really interesting or ironic, I guess you could say, that your confidence flipped in that situation, right? Because I pulled some quotes as well from I think it was in the intro of the book or one of the sections where I'm assuming it was around this time in your life where you're saying things like, oh my God, that sucked. I don't belong here. And other, negative, not very supportive things to yourself, which, just I want to take a moment. I think a lot of us speak like this to ourselves in many different situations. And, it's not about judging ourselves in these moments, but just to recognize that I think we deserve better, right? Like we would never speak to our family members or our friends like that. I mean, but somehow we can be pretty damn mean to ourselves. So for you, like what was it? Like how did you pause? How were you eventually able to pause that and kind of zoom out and be like, I'm not going down this track anymore?
Because it didn't work. I felt horrible. It impacted my performance. It impacted how I related to other people. It impacted my well-being. And I think I did it. I spoke like this because that's all I knew, and it was a way to motivate myself. That's how I had always motivated myself. But what I didn't know is the power of self-talk and how we talk to ourselves really impact how we feel and how we act. And I thought positive self-talk meant you're great, you're whatever the Saturday Night Live skit was, looking at yourself in the mirror saying, I can do this. I'm great. That's what I thought. And I poo-pooed self-help. I thought, what is this load of crap?
Yeah.
But I was starting on a new project. This time it was a movie also, and it was with Ryan Reynolds, Kevin Bacon, and Jeff Bridges. And I started having the same anxiety feeling and self-doubt and being obsessed about or what other people are thinking, needing validation, not being able to take risk and play. And by chance, I saw a book in a bookstore called The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success by Deepak Chopra.
Mm-hmm.
And it caught my attention because I had heard him on the radio like 2 weeks earlier in my car. And so I picked up the book and something really spoke to me. And I don't know if have you read that
I
book?
haven't, no, but I know of it.
Yeah. And it was all the principles in there were about trusting and giving. And there's 7 principles. And so I don't know, it spoke to me. It took the focus out of myself and into the world, into what I could bring to people every day.
Yeah.
And it really opened up a whole new way of being. And I made myself little flashcards from the takeaways. And every morning before I went on set, I would look at these flashcards. And so that was my first practice of mental fitness, daily mental fitness, is rehashing that language that really spoke to me. It changed the way I felt in the morning, and then it stayed with me all day long and gave me a intention. And then what was interesting too is I started looking at actors around me, and I was like, he's giving. Look at Kevin Bacon. He's coming to the makeup trailer and bringing apples to everyone. Jeff Bridges is One day Jeff Bridges came to us in a parking lot with a book, and he said, guys, I want to read to you this passage from this book. And he read to us. It was the most beautiful
Wow.
gift. And I remember thinking, understanding, oh, this is giving. You can be intentional about sharing and giving. And I said to Kevin Bacon later, I think the next day or something, that was so beautiful how Jeff Bridges did that. And he said to me, oh, you liked it? You should tell him, because he came to me later and was like, did I make a fool out of myself for reading out loud to you guys?
Isn't that interesting? I wanted to ask you about, because I wanted to ask, and you're kind of alluding to this with just that comment, but if you ever asked any of your colleagues on those sets, if, like, do you struggle with this kind of self-talk or any of this? Like, maybe not then and there in that moment. But I'm sure you've talked to your colleagues at this point. But isn't it interesting? Like, you can see it. Like, we're all facing some sort of level of self-doubt. But for whatever reason, when we see kind of public-facing people or people that we look up to and idolize, it's like, well, of course they don't have that, right?
Yes, and that was amazing. Yes, I learned that. I was like, oh my gosh, we're all the same, no matter how successful or famous we might be. And actually, even Kevin Bacon said to me before we started production, when we were rehearsing, he was like, oh, I'm such a mess. I didn't sleep well last night. I always get like this before a new project. And so I think what's really interesting is when you admit that, it's the second you admit it, also, it's almost allows you to just move through it.
Yeah.
As opposed to denying it and thinking you have to have it all figured out. And it's a little bit about what we were talking earlier, right? In these high pressured environments, thinking that you have to look like you are not vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I think that just makes whatever doubt or frustration or whatever's going on inside, it just makes it grow and grow and grow when you deny it.
For sure. For sure. And I think just with your example and what you shared, I mean, for you personally, but even what, Kevin Bacon was doing and Jeff Bridges and so forth, it's kind of like an element of their playbook. Like, this seems like this was the start of the playbook concept, right? Of like priming your mind, even though they're giving, he was giving apples away and so forth. Probably didn't even realize this, but that gratitude loop was fueling his mind just as much as fueling the rest of the people on set, right? And putting him in a state of feeling good and preparing and so forth.
Yes, that's what I had learned about gratitude, but I didn't really understand it. And that's what I realized with all these, these really established actors. They're not only great actors, but what they bring on set to the whole crew, to everybody they meet, is a little bit of, I don't know, is so authentic and giving, and they elevate everyone around them. And I think that's why they are who they are.
Yeah. I'd like to chat about present day Stephanie and how, like, what is it for those of us that don't know? I mean, we're all consumers of the output of a lot of the work that you do, obviously on screen and so forth. But I'd love to know just present day Stephanie, with all of the insight that you have and the work that you're doing around mental health and mental fitness and so forth. A new job comes in, or a new project, or film, or whatever it is. You say yes. Where do you like what? How do you start mentally? Like, what's your routine? What's your prep? Like, do you have any tools or practices that you do from kind of day one, and then that maybe stay with you for the project? What does that look like for you?
I like to journal, and I
You
ask
and me both.
myself, yeah, well, I don't journal often, but when I start a new project, I ask myself, what would it mean for me for this experience to be incredible?
I love that.
And so, and then it's not just about the work, it's about relationships. It pushes me to explore all the different elements of the job, and I discover things doing that.
Yeah.
Um, and I I dive into I oftentimes and my process is different for each project, but I oftentimes also go back to acting books that I love, just to be inspired by the words of these teachers.
Mm.
Going to museums also helps me to sometimes just going to a museum and trusting that I'm going to see something that's going to inspire me. So I guess doing things that help my creativity um, open up and maybe quiet down my mind is important, because creating a character can be very intellectual, asking questions about this character. Oh, another thing that's really cool that I discovered, as I wrote this book, Selfish, which is kind of embarrassing that it took me so long to realize, but I realized the process of creating a character is asking all these questions and diving in about their story and what are their strengths, what are their vulnerabilities, their hopes and dreams, their past traumas, what do they really want, what are they ashamed to tell people? All these things. And the
Yeah.
more you know these things, the more you can portray them and honor them in a way that's rich and deep. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of what we have to do for our own lives too.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we all do elements of that. I mean, maybe some less than others, but then I think we all get to some point where we hit some sort of metaphorical wall. And again, sometimes those walls are big or smaller, but there's usually some sort of forced reflection point. Whereas I feel
Mhm.
like there's some. I mean, we saw a lot of this even just through COVID. There's just a lot of big kind of life questions being thrown around for people and so forth. And um, I think it's
Yeah.
interesting to take that example, right? Like, to your point, like, you prepare to to be another person or another character in a film,
Mm.
but it's like, who's my character right now? And again, from a place of non-judgment, but like, would I like to bring in some edits to that character if I was playing this person outside of myself in a way? Have you asked that question, or what's your reflection been going through kind of this journey?
Would I like to, can you repeat that question again? Would I like
Would,
to?
would you? I mean, would you like to provide any, I guess, edits to your current like whenever you're thinking about yourself from that
Mm.
perspective of a character, right? Because I think we all
We,
have the opportunity to write the next chapter, but it's
yes.
hard to pull out of the autopilot of life usually to your point. I think I love that you do this for movies. Like, just go to a museum or put yourself in places where you can quiet your mind enough to ask those questions and think.
Yeah, and there's so many things because of what you just said. The first thing is, when you work on a character, no matter who this character is, there's a rule that you should not judge your character, right? You
Mm,
can't, and and that is something I think that is also very useful for our own selves to come. It doesn't mean we're not going to hold ourselves accountable, but to come from a place of compassion when we look at where we are in life. Then you said something about it's often when we hit a wall, right, that we're pushed to do those questions, like during or to inquire about ourselves, like during COVID. And I found that also it's when something hits you, when you lose someone, when you're dealing with a health diagnosis, that's usually when we do those or a good time to do those questions, because we don't always do that, and then we go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
But there's an exercise in the book called The Impossible Future, which was given to me by a therapist in my 30s. And it's a little bit what you're saying, but not editing yourself, but sort of giving the freedom for you to reflect of what would you like your life to be like 5 or 10 years down the road in an impossible future, meaning in a future where there are no limits or barriers or money is not, an issue.
Which I did this morning, by the way. It was a beautiful experience.
Yeah, but you did it for the day, right? You said?
No, I did it. No, I did it. I did it this morning to start my day. This is one of the things that excites me most about journaling practices is that, because I've been reading your book, obviously, to prepare for this conversation, but I flagged the page and left it for like almost in anticipation or in an excitement to start today with this practice. And I remember I woke up and I did some physical exercise and I was just pumped, because knowing that I had these questions and this practice from you to start the day. Because you know, once you start doing these things, and you know this, and I think a lot of listeners have probably experimented with different modalities and questions and whatnot, like it's impossible not to leave an exercise like that not feeling motivated or inspired or coming up with something that you may have not thought about, especially if you follow like what you're saying and kind of treat it as there's no rules to this. And I found on my side like a lot of, not, I wouldn't say half, but there were more elements than not that I was like, I'm kind of living some of these aspects of what I would love the future version of life to be, which was like, well, that's good. Like they can see the work is starting to kind of materialize, or the results of the work, I should say.
Yeah, in a way of living.
Yeah.
And you said you did physical exercise before. Does that help you also sort of surrender to or to come to a place where you can be more creative and opened?
Yeah, I try to, whether it's the other one that works really well, I find with just to use as kind of like I guess you can say like an appetizer to a good practice like this is to do some breath work, or a meditation or something like that. But in this case, I did a spin, like a Peloton spin, and just I think the big thing is without any outside inputs. And just in this case, it was moving the body and like got a good sweat going and felt good. And then from that place, you start answering these questions because it's very different. I've been here as well. I mean, you've read the intro, at least to my book, like to answer those questions when you're in a state of massive stress or fear or uncertainty. What comes from that is like the answers are completely different.
Yes, that's what I would say is for me what I'm at I cannot believe all this work that you talk about and that we've done, the power of these little practices that we can do. And there's so many, and it's about finding the right ones for you, but also the right one for the day, and how that can impact like the next hour of our day. I started reading your book, and one of the questions that you have is, how do I want to feel after this event? And I was getting ready for something that I was actually not looking forward to. And I was like, why did I say yes to this? And I don't have time for this. And then I caught myself, which is also, I think,
that's a skill.
important to realize.
Yeah.
What?
That's a skill in itself, to catch ourselves.
Yeah, and to also accept that we're never gonna not go down those, all those different roads of frustration and all that. But I caught myself, and then I was like, oh, I had read your book the night before going to bed, and I was like, let me do that exercise. And it completely changed my frame of mind. And then I was like, what can I bring to this thing that I'm doing and give people? And I had a great experience. So thank you.
Well, you're putting a big smile on my face. Thank you for sharing that. But that, to your point, I think it's, my book aside, because I'm getting just as much value out of yours and of course this conversation, but it's this, to your point, I think it's those small little micro moments, right? Where like literally in the seconds of the day end up allowing us to just have a completely different perspective in something. And that's what lights me up about these practices, because we don't have to sit in so much mental torture day in and day out.
And the micro moments, the repetition of those moments day after day, I think is for our mind is so powerful. Just like we're doing reps at the gym, we do reps for our mental fitness. There's a behavioral scientist that helped me with the book, and he said behavioral change comes from 3 steps. The first one is awareness, then learning new skills, but then doing the repetitions. And for me, doing the reps before I start anything else in the day, before I look at emails or text or the news, has been the game changer, because it's reminding myself of the principles, the things that I want to practice, how I want to show up for people. And then if I do that before I get in on the hamster wheel, it gives me a chance to not get spinning so much.
Yeah. Well, because you're playing, at least for me, it feels like you're playing catch up, where you're always kind of like, oh, I'm just trying to get this in or trying to do this. Then it's kind of like counterintuitive to the whole point of having these practices in place. And like, that's a lot of, I feel like a lot, and this, I say this because sometimes I'm guilty of this as well, but like, I think a lot of people start their days like that. It's like the email or the work just starts, and then it's all day. It's just nonstop, just running from thing to thing, and never get a moment to just, even physically breathe, with like nice long breaths. But also, I think, as an example, the mind just doesn't get to breathe either. And we're just constricted all day. I wonder why we feel drained, right?
Yeah. And we get hijacked by all these narratives and the news, and when we look at our phones, it's not only words, there's images and words together and videos, and it's playing on a loop constantly in our minds and hijacking how we feel, and then we get caught in the same old unsupportive thoughts that we've always been caught in.
Yeah. I would love to talk a little bit about just the idea or concept around the playbook. And so maybe 2 questions. One, just like, what is that from your perspective? And for you, like, what does your playbook look like when you're in a role? Like, what does that look like on a daily basis or so forth? And does it change? Like, just because I feel like the playbook is what I love, and kind of how to open the conversation with you is just a beautiful, practical way to implement these kind of tools that we're talking about.
Yeah, so the playbook is something I created 6 years ago because, when I read that book from Deepak Chopra, the book and the flashcards went back on the bookshelf. And then I forgot about these great concepts.
Mm-hmm.
And
You're
I
human.
learned... Yeah, exactly. And I got distracted by life. But I kept learning and kept forgetting. And actually, it was my husband's idea. He goes, why don't we have a place where we can put all the things that elevate our mindset? And we could start every single day by looking at these things so that we have a chance to practice them during the day and feel the high that we felt when we first learned about these things. And so that's what the playbook is. And I now have a beta version of an app where, you can put all the things that help you think better, feel better, and do better. Obviously, all of our playbooks are different and personal. And so when I'm working, it's interesting you said, what is your playbook like when you're working? And it is different from when I'm home, not on set. But when I'm working, I meditate every morning. This is something I actually do most mornings. I do 5-minute journal.
Yep.
And I read a page of The Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday. And I just do this, the 5-minute journal and Daily Stoic, and watch my playbook as I'm drinking my coffee. Then I like to do meditation. I'll do some sort of physical practice. I recently started doing Qigong, which I love. And then I warm up my vocal cords and relax my body, do some breathing. And so it's all of this to really get grounded before I get on set, and get there in a place of I'm here, I'm opened, I'm ready to play, and just embrace the unknown. That's how I feel. I wish I did all of this in my daily life all the time, but I don't. But that is how I like to. That is sort of how I strive to show up, be in a place where this is who I am. This is what I hope to bring to the day, but now I'm here and let go.
I love it. What do you think's holding you back from not having some of these practices in just the regular schedule?
What is holding me back? I get caught up. So when I'm home, I have coffee, I do the playbook, I watch that, I do the journal, and then the Daily Stoic. And then I usually start writing and creating, and I get caught up in that because the morning is when I feel I'm most creative.
Mm-hmm.
But
you're still doing that flow, that Daily Stoic.
Yeah, but I don't necessarily do the physical thing.
Oh, I see.
I don't go out. So I get stuck writing a lot, and I need to be more disciplined about, I don't know, or maybe just picking days where I could do the writing and other days where I go outside, because nature to me is a huge, really important thing. Walking outside, enjoying nature.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you suggest, Mark?
Well, I think like anything, I mean, what's the easiest way to integrate the physical aspect into those non-set days, I guess you can say. And maybe if it's writing, because I obviously resonate with that as well, is maybe that's like your afternoon break or something.
Oh, yes.
Right.
So just be okay with not doing it in the morning.
Yeah.
And there you go.
I mean, with a big caveat, of course, but you like just knowing your background and that you've done a lot of work, for someone that's just kind of getting started in this, that as soon as we move past the morning, it becomes harder because we all know life happens, and next thing you know, it's like, oh well, I'll do it later, and it just gets pushed, right? But given you're quite, it seems like you're quite intentional and disciplined with having playbooks for certain situations, just like for when you're on sets, like, hey, this is the playbook, and then, well, for writing days, this is the playbook. Or the other one that I haven't done this yet, but your book and this whole concept is inspired, is I really want to just create a playbook for really intense situations, like emotionally charged. We all know what that, like, I know what it is for me, like right away I can feel it in my chest or stomach, and like, okay, just take a breath. Like I'll bring in a practice or two, but like, I'd love to just sit down and be very intentional with when this happens, here's the sequence of events. It's like, go to that area in your house, like what you and your husband are talking about, and I pull this off the shelf, you know?
Yeah, I have one for difficult situations.
Mm, what's
And
that
yeah,
look
and
like?
there's things, well, there's things in there, and it's a lot of it is from books or
Okay.
podcasts, but things in there such as, every tormentor or hard moment is an opportunity, can serve as a teacher. And um, I mean, I didn't look at it today, but and
Yeah,
see,
yeah.
that's amazing. Like it just shows you right now. I'm like, what else does it say? It also has pictures in there of hard things that I've done.
Oh, I love
Uh,
that. Yeah.
and so it's reminders that, oh, and there's something that I love that I've heard. Any moment can be, you can look at it either as a threat or an opportunity. And so I would actually put in there that question that that I did that day about how do I want to feel after this moment. Remember to do this when you're about to have a challenging day, or
Yeah.
also to come from a place. Oh, there's another skill that I have, which is try to find three things you're grateful for of
Yeah.
this particular hard situation. I think I learned this from Hal Elrod.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what I love about all of this, Stephanie, is just that I think it's the humility of knowing that when we're in these situations, there's enough going on that we can just, I guess, know that we can't trust our mind to just come up with the right thing in those situations, or to do what's best for us, because we know that we're kind of still operating in this like prehistoric mode of we're
Mm-hmm.
just going to be pushed into a stressful state from years of biology and whatnot, but that's just not.
Evolution and
Yeah,
survival.
exactly. And we
Yeah.
just know that that's outdated programming for our current reality. So just to be, you know, self-aware enough, like, okay, when this happens, and I think the way you just said, I can't remember everything that's in the playbook. I feel like that's a perfect example of why we need these playbooks. It's like, okay, well, because you're not in that state right now, but if you were in that state, then you go and then you have the things that you know that will put your mind in a better state and shift perspective, and we just need those reminders.
Yeah, and you can't rely on your memory. There's an example that I used to illustrate that is if you look at a football coach on the sideline, on the sidelines, they have those big sheets, their playbooks with
Yeah.
all the plays that help their team respond to whatever's going on on the field. And when it's fourth quarter and the pressure is really high, they're not relying on their memory to be like, oh, this is the play that we call when this. They have their playbook where it's all mapped out, so they can communicate and have something to fall back on for that particular situation.
Yeah, totally. Totally. I did want to ask you first of all, though, we're getting close to time. Do you have a few more minutes?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay,
Yes.
great. So there's the playbook. I'll go back just to keep it grounded in the example of when you're on set. So you have your morning flow and playbook, but when you're there during the day, and I don't know, maybe some of the old programming or language comes
Mm-hmm.
up where that wasn't good, or I'm not good enough, or something else happens. Do you have a non-negotiable or go-to practice or question or ritual to help you in that moment?
When I'm on set specifically, I just what I do right in that moment. A lot of times, the reminders from my playbook will come back to mind,
Okay.
but my body is really my anchor in those moments, and just feeling my 2 feet on the ground,
Hmm.
relaxing my knees. It's going to sound maybe weird, but I've noticed that in those moments, my knees are usually locked. So
Oh,
I bend my
interesting.
knees slightly and I move my ribs to, again, loosen everything up. And then I try to listen to the silence. And set is usually super noisy.
Okay.
And so I just first hear the first noise that I hear. And then I'm like, what's the noise beyond that and beyond that, until I can hear, maybe the humming of the AC that's going. And then I'm just like, I'm here, right now. And the last thing is no ego. Drop the ego, forget the ego, and just be here for this character. Yeah. And that helps me to just find the surrendering to just what I'm doing. And it's not about me, it's bigger than me.
Yeah. I love that. I feel like I need to go back and, I've seen a lot of the movies that you've been in. I need to go and rewatch them all from knowing this other perspective of you, which is just beautiful.
Thank you.
Do you have any final words, or is there anything that you wish I would have asked you about? And now's kind of the time. Just, obviously no script. There's nothing. Whatever you'd like to share.
Well, I just want to share that I'm amazed at that I was able to write this book with a mental health nonprofit that is called Give an Hour. I never meant to share any of my practices. I'm kind of a private person, and Give an Hour reached out to me during COVID. They asked me what my practices were, and I explained the concept of the playbook, and they loved it. We shared it with their community, and then that led to creating this workbook. And I hope that it can help inspire a lot of your listeners to not only go through the self-discovery, but really create their own playbook for every day with all the stuff that lights you up and helps you in difficult moment, or reminds you of the joy in your life. We all, I think, I really resonate with the concept that in any moment we can reconnect to the best of who we are.
Yes.
And when we do that, we bring so much to the people around us. And so that's what I hope I can inspire you to do.
Well, I feel like we've definitely inspired some people already on that front. I'm sure you can feel it on this side as well. Even just with some of the practices I've shared and you've shared from the book have been quite impactful, and powerful playbooks and prompts and little tricks and tools and so forth that it doesn't matter who we are, what we're doing, what's going on in our lives are highly impactful and helpful. So I'm happy you took that call and went down that road, and now we have this beautiful book, and as you mentioned, the app as well that's coming, and all of your just the ripple effect of you being you and putting the work in for yourself, and continuing to show up, and so like that is 1000% transferring into all of the other work that you're putting out there, including what we get to see on TV and on screens and so forth, and that means a lot as well. So thank you for everything that you do.
Well, I'm happy to be on your podcast and one story added, because that's what's helped me so much in the hard moments, was listening to your podcast, other podcasts, and hearing other people's stories and what helps them. There's such power in storytelling, whether it's fictional or real, but just to realize, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one going through this. And this seems like it could help me.
That's so true. So true. Yeah. Thank you.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous two-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.